On Landline today, on the road with a mob of novice drovers raising money for essential services in the bush.
If you haven't had a trip with the Royal Flying Doctor, if you haven't had a trip in the care flight, you're pretty bloody lucky, you know. But everyone knows somebody who's been evacuated, and so it's important to keep those services going.
Growing the essential ingredient in gin right here in Australia.
We chose something in juniper that is, at the moment, it's very much a developing industry, an emerging industry. And we're at the cutting edge of that.
And Vale Ian Parmenter, pioneering TV chef and passionate promoter of WA's Margaret River's food and wine.
Never lost my passion for life. And being an atheist, I know that there was nothing up there or down there, and so we have to live for what we have here. That's what I strive for. Oh, so good.
Hello, I'm Pip Courtney. Welcome to the program. The heritage wooden vessel, the Tacoma, helped pioneer the tuna fishing industry in Port Lincoln in the 50s. In retirement, she's been taking out adventurers to catch tuna the old way, with poles. She's also flying the flag for maritime heritage tourism and recently made a triumphant return to Port Fairy in Victoria, where she was lovingly handcrafted 72 years ago. Here's Port Lincoln reporter Jodie Hamilton.
It's a grand welcome for an old friend. The last time tuna fishing legend Jack Bellamy looked at this view from the deck of the Tacoma, he was just 17 years old and waving his family goodbye. Along with his twin brother Keith, he joined the Haldane family on the Tacoma on January 6, 1952, when it left Port Fairy and set out to pioneer the Australian tuna fishery in Port Lincoln, South Australia. Today, the 90-year-old is on board the boat, where he spent most of his working life, returning to where he watched the three Haldane brothers, Bill, Alan and Huey, build the Tacoma. This is the first time the boat has returned to the Moyne River, where it was launched in 1951. Jack Bellamy knows the Tacoma like no one else.
I lived 15 years on this boat before I was married. This was my home. And the old Argus stove there used to go 24 hours a day. Keep the place lovely and warm.
Up until 2 years ago, he was still poling southern bluefin tuna onto the wooden boat's deck during fishing trips out of Port Lincoln.
Poles in the pad.
As a 10-year-old in 1944, Jack watched the Haldane brothers start building the historic 25.6-metre fishing boat from logs felled in the Otway Ranges.
I was only 2 houses away from when they were building the boat. And I could look out our kitchen window and I could see the boat being built over the years. Being so young, not so much and take much notice, but as the years went on, you see the boat growing and all the framework going up, all the ribs and everything. It was an amazing job to think what they'd done, the three brothers, you know.
Jack was an apprentice butcher and Keith an apprentice baker, but both were lured to a life at sea and joined the Haldane brothers and their young families on the maiden voyage to South Australia. Tacoma Preservation Society President Ross Haldane was one of the 7 children on board for the adventure of a lifetime.
I was 4.5, but I do remember leaving Port Fairy. I can remember the boat going into its first big waves. We were up on the top deck and a wave sort of came over the boat, or splashed, and we quickly ran down into the galley and watched the waves from there.
His brother, Roger, was 6 years old.
Probably at that age you haven't got real specific memories, but I can remember us getting decked out. I had a little sailor's hat and my cousin had a little captain's hat. My memories are heading out into the big wide ocean, and we were sitting up on deck, up alongside the funnel, and it was quite a bad day, like quite a big roll-on, and people I've talked to since it's all relieving. It's gone through their mind is we'll never see them again.
It's taken more than 70 years, but some of those Port Fairy locals came to see the Tacoma make its way back up the river to visit their town.
The day that left, yeah, oh, it was a great sight seeing it going up the Moyne River. Such a big structure. I can remember it being built. It was just an amazing thing. It was just like it was the Titanic being built. Just so impressive for a little kid, you know, to see it being built. It was just fantastic. When it came up the river today, I was just gobsmacked. No, it was wonderful. Really great sight.
There is little of the Tacoma's presence in Port Fairy, and some want to bring its story to life.
There's a sign on the fence down where the boat was built saying a boat built in the backyard. And I just felt that there needed to be a better understanding and more recognition of the background about the Tacoma. Port Fairy is a tourist town, and it promotes the fact that it has maritime history. That is crucial to the ongoing survival of the story of the Tacoma and other boats and history around our fishing and boat building. That's the next step, to keep bringing that to life for now and future generations.
3 cheers for the Tacoma. Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip!
The Haldane family had built several boats before attempting the larger Tacoma with the aim of fishing for tuna in deeper waters. It would take them 7 years to finish the American-designed boat. When their money ran out, a loan of £20,000 from the South Australian government was the bait to lure the Tacoma to Port Lincoln.
When we left on the 6th of January 1952, Port Fairy was about the same size fishing fleet as Port Lincoln, similar catches. Today, Port Fairy virtually hasn't got a commercial fishing fleet left. Port Lincoln is the seafood capital of Australia, and we catch something like 70,000 tonne, which is about 20% of all fish in Australia come from Port Lincoln.
By knocking back my father and his brothers, you know, like they were after additional loans to finish the boat. South Australia stepped in and picked up the baton, and Victoria literally, you know, missed the boat.
Australia's fishing fleet has more than 7,000 boats, most of which are under 10 metres. In South Australia and Tasmania, the greatest proportion of domestic commercial vessels are fishing boats. And those historic fishing boats like the Tacoma are being seen as a drawcard for maritime tourism.
I think there's huge potential. Tourists are attracted to historical things and also a little bit of adventure. So the Tacoma itself provides that, in that you can actually go to sea on it, and you can also just visit on it, hear the history of Port Lincoln. They do some fantastic storytelling. It's a drawcard for our seafood capital of Australia here in Port Lincoln. We've also got wooden vessels that have sunk, the Almonte, for example. So that's another example of potential tourism where people could go diving to have a look at it.
The appeal of the story of the Haldane brothers, Jack Bellamy and the Tacoma, drew young and old to welcome the boat home at Port Fairy.
We absolutely would love the Tacoma to keep coming back here. We have had to dredge the channel a little for it. It has got a draft that's quite deep, this beautiful old vessel, but we would love to see it come back here time and time again. This is its spiritual home, if you like.
The Haldane family gifted the Tacoma to the Australian public, and volunteers of the Tacoma Preservation Society keep it running.
Tacoma would be amongst the top 20 vessels in Australia. Not only can you go aboard and see, you can actually go to sea on her. She's been beautifully maintained, and she's quite unique in that regard, in as much as most vessels have hard times before anyone realises they should have been kept. But the Haldanes had enough vision to know that when she was retired from professional fishing, to keep her going, to keep her as an example of the fishery of the 1950s, and they've been doing a wonderful job of it. It was wonderful to see her coming up the river today, back to her home port where she was born 72 years ago. I was getting a bit emotional. I had to get my hanky out. Beautiful.
All the family found that particular point pretty emotional coming, you know, because the last we'd ever seen was Fletcher Jones' photos of it disappearing down the down the river heading out, and to see it coming actually back in after 72 years was a pretty big deal. To see the amount of people lined up to welcome it was just, blew us away.
I think returning to Port Fairy is an historical moment for not only my family but also for Port Fairy itself, because this is the biggest boat ever built in Port Fairy, and it's part of the DNA of this fishing port.
The timbers laid all those years ago that shaped the deck of the Tacoma are worn with the stories of the men who helped pioneer the fishing industry. But it wasn't all glorious. The dangers of frontier fishing is close to the heart of the Tacoma. Here at the Fisherman's Memorial, there are lists of names of entire crews lost at sea. Among those names is Keith Bellamy, Jack's twin.
Yeah, good. He's a good fisherman. He liked me, liked fish, he liked the boat over all these years, Anyway, lifetime ran out, that was it. Nothing about it.
Fishing alongside Jack, Keith was pulled from the wreck by a tuna and drowned. His body was never recovered.
We were in that school of tuna, and all of a sudden, Keith went over the side. He was in the water went down his throat and choked him. That was it. It was all over.
Jack continued his working life on the Tacoma. His return to Port Fairy was special.
It was beautiful coming around the point, the lighthouse, coming into the Port Fairy. I thought, where she was built here, she's come back to our old home to show the people what the boat still looked like after all these years, and it's been well maintained.
G'day, I'm Courtney Wilson, and today we're along a stretch of an old stock route in Queensland's Burnett region, about 65 k's west of Eidsvold. Coming up on the show, we hit the road with a mob of drovers raising money for life-saving services in the bush. Join us for the journey on the Eidsvold Cattle Drive.
Juniper berries are the essential ingredient in gin. But despite the booming number of gin distilleries in Australia, we're still importing our berries. A family in the snowy Monero district want to change that and are trying juniper growing alongside their grazing operation. Bega reporter Adrian Reardon paid them a visit.
Gin is an incredibly popular spirit in Australia, but the main ingredient, juniper berries, is mostly imported. Farmer Lucy Vincent is on a mission to change that.
Most Australian artisan gins that are made, which are awesome, but most of them are made with juniper that comes from overseas, so Italy, Bulgaria, Greece, Macedonia, those places. There are 3 gins in Australia that are made with Australian juniper only. And so I want to change that.
Lucy took over the family farm near Bibbinluke in the New South Wales Snowy Mountains a few years ago, but knew she wanted to try something different. So, alongside the cattle, she and her partner Bruce decided to grow juniper berries.
And we chose something in juniper that is, at the moment, it's very much a developing industry, an emerging industry. And we're at the cutting edge of that.
Juniper berries are actually the female seed cones of a type of conifer. They are the essential ingredient of gin and give the spirit its distinctive flavour.
Oh, that tastes like gin.
Lucy and Bruce planted their first 300 trees across their 151 hectare property in 2018. Now they have close to 600 trees and what they think is one of the largest establishing juniper orchards in Australia. In their 3rd year of harvesting, Lucy admits they're still finding their feet.
First year was kind of funny. We got 2.2 kilos, which, was like having another child. Really exciting, but commercially useless. Second year, massive increase. We got just over 60 kilos.
This year, the harvest was less than ideal. With high rainfall and severe flooding in 2022 affecting pollination, they only managed about 30 kilograms. But the harvest for 2025 is looking very promising.
So when you look at a female juniper, you'll see they've got two different coloured berries on them. They've got the green berries, which are unripe, and then they'll have the blue-black berries, which is what you're harvesting. That's the ripe juniper.
Lucy has gone to great lengths to gauge just how good her juniper berries actually are. She had them scientifically tested and compared to imported produce. The University of Tasmania compared the yields of 4 Australian juniper berries to those from overseas as part of a research thesis in 2023.
So we had 3 different sites or locations of juniper berries from New South Wales. We had one from Victoria, and we compared them to a range of imported berries, but notably from Macedonia, where traditionally the best quality berries come from that are used in gin.
Good morning, Alicia and Caroline.
The juniper berries underwent a distilling process and the essential oils were analysed. The results were encouraging.
The Australian samples, one sample was essentially, in terms of yield, exactly the same essential oil yield, but the other 4 samples were significantly higher. So in terms of essential oil yield, we're seeing really positive yields coming out either at the benchmark or above the benchmark of the international product.
For Lucy, who was already collaborating with a local distiller, it was confirmation the quality of her berries is top-notch. Master distiller Gavin Hughes runs the award-winning North of Eden gin based in nearby Bega. He decided to join forces with Lucy after she paid a visit to his distillery.
Lucy just came out to the cellar door one day and introduced herself and said, "Hey, I'm growing juniper bushes." So it was really a chance meeting. And then she said, "Well, you know, if we ever grow any fruit, would you be interested in purchasing it from us?" And I said, "Sure."
Gavin has been using imported juniper berries for his gin since 2019. They cost around $40 a kilogram. Most of the other botanicals used in the gins here are grown on his farm or sourced locally. Making the switch to locally grown juniper, although more costly at $50 per kilo, was an opportunity too good to pass up.
So to be able to take Australian grown juniper, grown within 100 kilometres from here, near Bombala, is just a fantastic thing. It lowers our carbon footprint, but makes it a truly Australian gin.
Controlling insects and finessing the drying and aging process of the berries involved much trial and error. But after extensive experimenting, last year Gavin launched his first gin using Lucy's berries and has just released the second. He believes there's a huge difference in taste.
We were delighted because the piney fresh note is just so clean and bright, so much brighter than what was before. Even though it was a great gin before and had medalled at the largest competitions in the world, we actually think this has taken it to the next level.
I thought the original version, which had Macedonian berries, I said it was like pastels, the pastel kind of colour. And then the same style of gin made from our juniper was like fluoros.
Juniper berries grow really well in certain conditions, but you need 3 things. 1, a hot summer. 2, a cold winter, even with a bit of snow if you can. And 3, high altitude. Here in the New South Wales snowy mountains, you've got those 3 things. And that's why there's potential for farmers in the region to diversify and enter the market.
Even researchers can see the potential.
I think distillers can express in their gin the local influence of our terroir, so that's the climate and soil effects on locally grown juniper trees. So this is something that's quite unique and could well be a selling point.
Lucy and Gavin admit it could be at least a decade before growing juniper berries takes off in Australia. Lucy says the farm will need to invest in mechanical harvesting rather than picking the prickly juniper by hand to make the business commercially viable.
So if you're in it for the money, this ain't the crop for you. But if you've got patience and a bit of curiosity, then yes, give yourself 5 to 10 years and you could be onto a good thing then.
That's what being in small business is about. That's what being in business is about. And if you're not prepared to take risks, and if you're not prepared to actually try new things, then you can never really create something which is great.
In the meantime, Lucy is dedicated to helping support the country's emerging juniper berry industry. She's even set up the Aussie Juniper Growers Group. But her farm is a passion project where the rewards outweigh any risks.
For me, obviously I want a farm that's commercially viable for my family, but really I want to have a really well-established juniper industry in Australia. So in 20 years' time, I'll be a happy person if there's a thriving juniper industry in Australia. Irrespective of whether my kids want to take over the farm or not, I guess for me that's my legacy of leaving a better farm, but also a commercially viable industry.
Hello, I'm Jane Norman. The federal government's proposed biosecurity protection levy is set to be implemented on the 1st of July. But with just weeks to go, it's still unclear how the money will be collected. The policy announced in last year's budget is designed to share the costs of keeping Australia free of pests and disease. Farming groups have been highly critical and used a parliamentary inquiry to call for the levy to be scrapped or delayed. Under the plan, importers and taxpayers would contribute the lion's share, while farmers would chip in about $50 million a year. The government has released a breakdown of what each agricultural sector is set to pay based on their average gross value of production.
It's still very unclear to Cattle Australia the manner in which this levy will be collected. Yes, it's been changed to a GVP model, and to be blunt, we at least welcomed that in the sense that it was a more equitable collection of a levy, and it's certainly one model that you might want to use. But as far as the actual collection mechanism is, we're still a bit in the dark.
The issue is that we don't know where this funding's going. We don't know if it's going to mean 3 more dogs or 10 more containers are going to be opened or what. That's the real issue with this, and we object to it from a policy perspective. This is poor, clumsy, lazy policy. That's what we object to.
The Senate is expected to vote on the levy next month following the tabling of the inquiry's report. The discovery of fire ants on the edge of the Murray-Darling Basin has sparked calls for an urgent review of funding to help stop the spread of the extremely invasive insects. The National Fire Ant Eradication Program has confirmed more than 100 fire ant nests were found at the Oakey Army Aviation Base near Toowoomba in Queensland. It's the furthest west the fire ants have so far been detected. The area is being treated and tests are underway to determine whether these fire ants are linked to the ongoing outbreak in southeast Queensland. In January, federal and state governments committed nearly $600 million over 4 years to eradicate the invasive species, which inflict a painful sting on humans, pets and livestock. But a Senate report has called for a rapid review of funding arrangements, arguing efforts to stamp out the species so far have been hampered by stop-start funding, a lack of transparency and too much bureaucracy. We recently brought you a story about the deaths of more than 100 cattle on board a live export ship bound for Indonesia. It was one of the highest rates of mortality ever reported on an Australian shipment. Authorities initially suspected the cattle may have died from botulism, a disease spread by bacteria. But Northern Territory Chief Vet Dr Rob Williams has told the ABC evidence now suggests the cause was actually a parasitic disease known as coccidiosis. That's because the cattle on the ship had come into contact with another herd of cattle which died from coccidiosis at an export depot near Darwin. Dr Williams says it's not a definitive conclusion, but he doesn't believe anything could have been done to prevent the unusual deaths. And finally, if you have any thoughts about the state of mobile phone and internet coverage in your neck of the woods, your views are being sought by the federal government. It's appointed former federal Labor MP Alana McTiernan to head a 3-yearly review into the adequacy of telecommunication services in rural, regional and remote Australia. To have your say, head to infrastructure.gov.au and follow the links. And that's Landline News.
Part of an old stock route in Queensland has been brought back to life by a mob of drovers retracing a 70-kilometre stretch. The Eidsvold Cattle Drive is raising money for life-saving services in the bush, and Landline's Courtney Wilson joined the journey.
Slowly and steadily, 450 head of cattle make their way across the stretch of river in Queensland's North Burnett region. It's quite the spectacle, and what seems like the whole town has turned out to take a look. The mob is surrounded by a team of drovers, but not the usual kind. They're ordinary people tackling a big challenge, keeping the spirit of droving alive, and alongside it, the quiet country town of Eidsvold.
I don't know what it is, but walking behind a mob of cattle along a dirt road, it just brings out stories and life, and yeah, it's amazing actually. Yeah, it's good therapy.
The Eidsvold Cattle Drive brings together people of all ages and ability on an adventure unlike any other in the country. For 7 days, alongside a team of very slick horsemen and women, the apprentice drovers are broken in. Over 70 kilometres, they take a trip back in time, spending long hours in the saddle day after day, riding in unfamiliar country behind a mob of cattle. It's a journey made easier under the capable command of boss drovers Bruce Tighe and Graham Pott. Two men absolutely committed to the end goal and to ensuring a little fun is had along the way.
What's kind of the nuts and bolts of the cattle drive?
To get a mob of cattle from out there into town and make sure we get the whole lot in.
The journey begins in Eidsvold itself, a fairly typical rural town that, like many others, has seen its share of good years and some not so good.
Well, we're on the headwaters of the Burnett River, which goes out to Bundaberg. Started off with mines and gold and that sort of thing, but they opened this country up to pastoralism and then later on in life, population sort of come in here with the railways and dairying was a big thing for a while, and cotton was a big thing. Now it's just about down to pastoralism, grain. That's about it now, I guess.
Day one sees the participants arriving to the showgrounds. Some are in pairs or small groups, but many are riding solo. They bring their own horses, which they'll ride on the drive.
Everyone's very nervous to begin with, which is understandable. Like, new place, their horses can feel and they know they're at a different place.
Kathleen Roth is part of the crew that runs the event. Her job is to help the group come together to work just as a team of drovers would.
So I just try and watch their horses mainly, see how they're reacting with other horses, and with the riders I just sort of see how well they can ride.
There are 26 participants for this year's drive. They saddle up for a test ride first, both to calm the nerves and to get a feel for what this country is like.
I'm from Brisbane, so I haven't been on a cattle drive before. But we have done cattle clinics and stuff at beginner level, so she has had a lot of exposure to that. So this is just a bit of a big adventure for us to give a crack at and see how she copes.
I'm from Caboolture and Cherie's at Mount Sampson, so northwest of Brisbane. It's a great experience to be able to, I guess, follow in the footsteps of what was done previously and a bit of that heritage stuff and history, and, you know, now you're helping out as well and bring some money into the local community.
But the weather wasn't playing nice. Day one was a total washout. The silver lining, though, which is always worth looking for, more time for the group to get to know one another before setting off. And time for the sizable crew of volunteers behind the scenes to iron out any kinks before the cattle drive hit the road.
We got a good crew here. Everybody knows their job and got their job, and it's all good.
Thankfully, after that one wet day, the weather gods really turned it on. And after a very wet summer here, the country is looking particularly beautiful. And what better way to take it all in?
We're usually on the horses by 7. We might get off for 5 minutes for smoko, get back on, go for lunch at about midday, and then back to the yards, well, to the next property, maybe 5 in the afternoon. So they are big days in the saddle.
They crisscross 7 separate properties, some days riding up to 15 kilometres. The youngest on this year's journey is just 7 years old, but they get through it together. Retracing the steps taken by drovers decades ago, when cattle were routinely walked long distances along stock routes to go to the sale yards. The cattle drive centres around one drover in particular, a bloke by the name of Martin Snelling, who still holds a world record for selling the most amount of cattle in one day. In 1932, through the Eidsvold sale yards, Snelling sold a whopping 7,500 head in just 4.5 hours on his own.
And there'll be people out there that say, oh, Roma sells 10,000, but there's a lot of agents there, and they've got, and God bless them, they do a good job. But I mean, this guy was way back in the history.
They'd have travelled through heavily timbered country, and once penned at the yards, they would have needed supplies for the cattle, before once again being walked out to wherever it was they were sold. After Snelling's historic sale, many were walked all the way down to Esk in the Brisbane Valley.
Yet all these cattle came in with drovers. They didn't sort of roll in trucks, and they didn't have hay sitting there and all that sort of thing. So these guys did all this, with drovers. It would have been a big organisation.
Today, the stock routes are still in use, although only from time to time. Bruce Hutchinson owns Tyrene, a station bordering a stretch of the stock route. And while it's hard to picture now with so much fodder available, he says in dry times, these routes remain critical.
Yeah, during the drought there's always cattle on the roads as well as stock routes, quite often. During winter last year it was very dry and they were certainly used. Yes, definitely.
The cattle drive spends one night on Tyrene before moving on. The setup involved in moving camp for a team this size and their animals is quite something. Even with the many hands on deck, it's definitely not light work.
What's your role in the cattle drive?
Normally the bus driver, but this year I'm towing the cold room, and my husband is also the treasurer of the committee. So, yeah, we just do whatever needs to be done around the camp.
Paul and Duncan are arguably the most important duo to keep on side. The camp oven cooks are charged with keeping the drovers fed and happy.
It's quite a production. A fair bit goes into it. How long does it take to get it going and, to cook up a meal?
At least 4 hours, probably. Depends what we're cooking, yeah.
And that's every night along the drive you do that?
Yep.
After up to 15 Ks in the saddle each day, the drovers don't really care what's cooking as long as it tastes good.
These guys are unreal what they get out of that pot every night. We're just so excited when we get back at the end of the day.
And sometimes when you're heading home, you're getting close to home and you can just smell the camp oven and it's just like, starts to brew. It's beautiful.
The cattle drive is run entirely by volunteers. The mob being taken on the road are donated by 3 local families just for the week. And the multiple properties they visit along the journey all agree to hosting the sizable entourage. For many of those behind the scenes, they give up not days but weeks and months of their time for planning and logistics.
It's definitely a team get-together, very much they pull together. We're very much just looked after all the way, so it's wonderful.
The reason so many people are willing to give up so much of their time is simple: the rescue helicopter and flying doctor.
I've had a helicopter trip before which saved my life, so it's probably fairly important.
I've been flown out 3 times before, 2 by the chopper, 1 by the aeroplane. So I had an accident out on a horse and the chopper actually flew out on property. So yeah, it's kind of just given back.
If you live in the city, the concept of being flown out for medical help can seem foreign. But out here, most people have a personal experience with these services.
If you haven't had a trip with the Royal Flying Doctor, if you haven't had a trip in the care flight, you're pretty bloody lucky, you know. But everyone knows somebody who's been evacuated, and so it's important to keep those services going.
The final full day sees the cattle drive crew end up just outside town, here at Eidsvold Station. Having covered plenty of country, it's time to cool off and a chance to relax and reflect on the week that was.
It's always pretty nice to pull up and have a beer, and that's part of it too, is the socialising afterwards and that sort of thing, and bringing the community of Eidsvold together, and also highlighting our little community.
Under the moonlight, on a beautiful autumn night, about 200 people celebrate the efforts of those who've helped make this cattle drive happen. Keeping the camp oven cooks very busy indeed. It's country hospitality at its finest. Finally, the finish line is in sight. The crew makes its way from Eidsvold Station into town. The river crossing is a highlight for all involved, and it's easy to see why. From there, the very last leg takes the drovers down the main street, much to the delight of some very special spectators.
When we come into town, one of the important things that we do is we pull up at the hospital, pull the cattle up there, and all the old timers that are in the hospital, all the older people that lived in here all their lives. The hospital staff are very good and bring them out to show them the cattle, and it lifts their spirits. It's really good.
Seeing the drovers command the 450-strong mob of cattle with confidence is a real treat for everyone. They round out the trip back where it all began, but what a difference a week has made.
We went very well. You would have seen us come into the showgrounds there, and a group of professionals couldn't have done it better. They went really well.
Everyone's still in one piece.
Yep.
We did have a couple of busters early on, but yeah, everyone's made it through, and their horses really improve over the week, and as riders they learn a lot as well.
They've raised an impressive $150,000 to be donated to Life Flight, the Royal Flying Doctor Service and the Burnet Rotary Lodge in Bundaberg. But it's not just about the cash injection they're leaving behind. What they're taking home is far more special.
You kind of get to do this for a week, camping out with them, and so it's pretty unique. So there's a certain level of closeness that comes with that, you know, sees you through the rest of your life, really, when you get those friendships, and it's great.
They've, you know, done the miles with the cattle. Like, they've gone from A and worked their way down to C, and it's just, I think, the satisfaction that, you know, they've done droving.
G'day, I'm Matt Brand. Australia's rice harvest is past the halfway mark and is looking pretty good. Here's some crop coming off near Moolameen in New South Wales. I'm told there's one farm in that region which had a paddock produce a record-breaking yield of 16.85 tonnes per hectare. According to ABARES, Australia's rice harvest is expected to rise 9% this year to about 555,000 tonnes. Global rice supplies remain tight because of dry weather in Southeast Asia and India's restrictions on exports, but this is not creating better prices for Aussie growers. Australia specialises in producing medium grain varieties of rice, and its biggest global competitor is the US, where prices have fallen dramatically. The Californian price has more than halved in the last 12 months and is sitting well below the 5-year average because demand is normal, and the US is reportedly sitting on an abundance of medium grain rice. In Chicago this week, wheat futures jumped sharply. I had a chat to Combank's Dennis Vosnesensky for his thoughts on what caused this rally.
If we look at the global bellwether for wheat prices, the Chicago Board of Trade, it increased from the lows of the 19th of April, so Friday, to this Friday by around 16%. It was quite substantial, went all the way from 533 US cents per bushel to a peak of 620. Now, in a week, that's very substantial and very quick. There's been a number of factors. It feels like the main factor that triggered the rise was when Israel sent those retaliatory strikes on Iran. While both of those countries don't play a significant role in grain markets, I think it just increased geopolitical risk and it made the market look around and see, do we have any other issues? And, well, it's drier in Russia, it's drier in eastern Ukraine. The USDA came out recently and said the US winter wheat acreage under drought has increased by 6% only in the span of a week. You have drier conditions in the western prairies of Canada heading into planting, dry conditions in Western Australia and in South Australia. And on the other hand, you also have expectations towards the end of this year that central banks are going to start cutting interest rates and increasing the demand for wheat. So that should, in theory, be quite supportive of pricing. We were just expecting that price support to come later in the year. The surprising factor is how quickly it's come about.
In the domestic market, prices went up across the board. It's still dry in WA and there's plenty of dry seeding getting underway in South Australia. It was a steady week for cotton futures. The Australian harvest, it rolls on, but rain looks to have downgraded some of the crop in southern Queensland, with reports that it could cost growers as much as $1,800 a hectare. Cattle numbers were down this week, and of course there were no sales on Anzac Day. Money eased for export-type cattle. The processor cow indicator slipped below $2 a kilo for the first time since the start of this year. One analyst told me that there's no doubt that processors are making excellent margins on cows at the moment. Now, check out this 2-week-old dairy heifer, which topped the Busybrook sale in New Zealand for $63,000. The calf was snapped up by Australia's Darren Crawford, who says he's on a mission to get back into the dairy industry after selling up in 2018 and was impressed with the genetics of this young calf.
Sold.
Australia produced a record amount of lamb in 2023 and is on track to break that record again this year, and consumers are seeing some benefits of this, it would seem. The latest ABS data shows retail lamb prices are down 12.3% compared to last year's average. Beef prices have also fallen a bit, but we are paying more for our pork, veggies and booze. In the sale yards, it was a short trading week, but unlike the cattle market, prices for sheep and lambs increased. On Friday, the WA government announced an $8.6 million drought relief package to help farmers and rural communities doing it tough.
Farmers can access hardship grants and they can use that grant to transport livestock where they do not have the financial means to cover those transport costs, or they can get reimbursement via an interest-free loan, which will help cover those additional costs.
And finally, to the wool market. AWI says there was some intense competition this week, which included new inquiries from India, and prices in the east went up. That is the Landline check on prices. Keep it rural.
Hello, I'm Helena in Queensland's Lockyer Valley. I'm standing in a trial site where they're growing sweet corn, maize and sorghum. 4 years ago, the very invasive species fall armyworm hit Australia. These guys are trying to figure out how to combat it. Have they succeeded? That story next week on Landline.
Margaret River is mourning the loss of one of its favourite sons. Just weeks before his passing, pioneering TV chef Ian Parmenter gave Landline's Sean Murphy what he promised would be his last ever interview.
And so you're approaching the kind of twilight of your life, I suppose, it'd be fair to say, at 80s around the corner.
Yeah.
And how would you describe yourself?
I don't know. How do I describe myself? Okay, let me think about that. I describe myself as somebody who's never lost their passion for things. Music, for instance. Never lost my passion for life. And being an atheist, I know that there was nothing up there or down there, and so we have to live for what we have here. That's what I strive for.
Passionate to the end. Ian Parmenter crammed a lot of passion into his 79 years.
They're among the most popular foods in the Western world. They should be crisp on the outside, soft on the inside, elegantly long, and either a pale yellow or golden brown. What are they? Well, of course, they're chips.
Ian Parmenter came to national prominence more than 30 years ago as the quirky chef behind Consuming Passions. The 5-minute program before the ABC's nightly news bulletin was a television pathfinder when cooking shows were rare.
Just wholemeal tends to make the bread a little heavy. 750 mils of water, a little salt, and the ingredient which strikes fear into the hearts of even the most competent cooks, yeast.
Consuming Passions was a stunning success, running for 450 episodes and reaching millions of viewers in 19 countries.
Mediterranean meatballs with citrus vegetables. And since the vegetables take longer, I'll start with them.
The format, which he created himself, was all about basic ingredients, simple recipes, and a liberal dash of humour.
For a wine accompaniment, I like quite a substantial red, a Cabernet Sauvignon, such as the one I used in the cooking. From Consuming Passions, till next time, bon appetit. And there you have it. Eggs 3 ways, and as you can see, each way is excellent. Sorry. From Consuming Passions, till next time, bon appetit.
It had to grab people enough, and if it's just a cookery segment, like some others we've seen, well, nobody's going to stay there and watch it, you know, for the 5 minutes before the news. But if it was humorous, as well as delivering one important message, and the recipes were simple, that everyone could do, no sprinkles of anything, no smears, no massive plates with tiny samples, it was the real deal for 450 programs.
So there it is, barbecue fish, brilly style, and an accompanying salad of tomatoes and a dressing of orange and rosemary. Perfect wine? Well, just about any white wine would work well, but a Colombard would be absolutely perfect. From Consuming Passions, till next time, bon appetit. Come to me, maybe you do.
Nobody did cooking. I mean, why would you do cooking? It would be boring. Yet it turned out that millions of people are fascinated by watching the Nigellas and everybody else cut a goddamn carrot. You know, it's fascinating. Yeah, OK, can you go back to...
Veteran ABC journalist David DeVos produced hundreds of episodes of Consuming Passions. He gave this interview before his good friend's passing. He reckoned it was Ian Parmenter's personality that made the show a huge success.
His personality just burst out of the screen. He's a loud person, he's a colourful person, and he's an actor. And I think he acts on the screen, and you're going to ask me, yes, he acts in life. And when you see him in a crowd, it's Ian Parmenter that you're seeing.
Ian Parmenter was a showman right up until the final weeks of his life. Whether it was a star turn on the blues harp with mates Mike Goodwin and Kevin McDonald, or just a stroll through the Margaret River Farmers Market, life was a stage.
Oh, Basil. Oh.
I'm not going to do that.
Look.
It's beautiful.
Right.
I believe you. I'm not going to do that.
Just like that. Macaron. These sweet things here, which I should take one, and she's not noticing.
That's all good. I haven't seen anything. This is, as it says here, 4 chocolates.
Yeah.
Caramel, dark chocolate, milk chocolate.
What a great idea.
With a little bit of stupid hot sauce in there.
And the hot sauce is actually local, isn't it?
It is, yes, yes.
Ian Parmenter was a founder of Margaret River's award-winning Farmers Market, which still runs on the strict guidelines he helped establish in 2002.
You have to grow it yourself, so whether that's in the soil or in aquaculture or making beer, you have to be making it. You can't be reselling other people's stuff, and it's got to be fresh as well.
His love affair with Margaret River began when he directed the Ray Charles Lewin Estate concert for the ABC in 1988. It was the national broadcaster's first live broadcast of the Lewin Estate series. To create a spectacular opening sequence, he took to the skies above.
It was a major operation, but part of the opening titles I wanted to do was an aerial shot around the region, which I'd never done before. So with the camera operator and me in the helicopter with the doors off, we flew low level around the entire region, and that's when I came to truly love the place it is. And then when this property came up in 1992, we just had to have it. I'm actually the ambassador for this fabulous concept, Gather and Feast.
Ian Parmenter became a passionate and tireless advocate for Margaret River. In 2011, he was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia for his service to the food and tourism industries, as well as his long career as an event director, journalist and broadcaster.
What do I get out of it is to see the benefit that it's giving to so many people and to see the promotion it's giving for local. I mean, local is everything to us, and the way the local scene has grown.
Margaret River is booming on the back of its stunning natural beauty and its growing reputation for fine food and wine. But it's come at a social cost. Homelessness and poverty are booming too. For the past 4 years, the Margaret River Community Pantry has been saving tons of food from landfill and increasingly feeding the poor.
You're working here now, are you?
Yes, I am.
On a permanent basis or just for today?
I'm afraid just for today.
Yeah, I thought that was.
I'm sorry that's the case.
Here we go.
Okay.
Ian Parmenter was prepared to wear some good-humoured shaming to promote the charity. And the community pantry is in more demand than ever as the cost of living crisis bites.
So a lot of people that you can't tell as well are like really struggling. A lot of people with mental health issues, physical disabilities, and yeah, just people who are just working and trying to get by really. Go up, a lot of single mums out there, or especially now with the housing crisis as well, like there's a lot of people struggling living in their tents and things like that.
Homelessness is also on the rise. The local advocacy group Just Home estimates 1,200 people are vulnerable to having nowhere to live in Margaret River in a population of just 16,000. And it's getting worse.
A third of the houses in the Augusta-Margaret River area are empty at any one time. That's what the census data tells us. And we know that more and more rental properties are being converted into Airbnbs because they're a lucrative offering.
Call this a sprig. It's a sprig of thyme. And in it goes. All right, and we want to fill this up. So
Ian Parmenter also helped establish the Margaret River Primary School's edible garden. It's central to the school's cooking program.
It's a good idea to put your fingers like that, so you're less likely to actually cut into your fingers, you see, like that. And that's the way you do it. Show me how you do it. It's important that they actually cook a dish that they can then eat, try, and sometimes they'll take it home. And they'll say to the parents, why aren't we eating food like this, you know?
In some ways, this is where the story closed a circle on the former TV cook's life. When he was the same age as these kids, his family moved from London to a brewery in Brussels where he learned to cook.
9 years after the war, I'm there in Brussels and I discover food. I mean, food like I've never eaten before.
That's really good, really well chopped, that's good.
And I spend most of my days, when not at school, I spend the days in the canteen learning how to cook. From the, you know, I couldn't understand their language of Flemish, but boy, I soon picked up the skills of cookery.
Ian Parmenter was one of a kind. A pioneering TV chef, a journalist and broadcaster, a passionate advocate. and all the while an enigma.
A small glass of red wine.
If someone described you to me, they said, look, I've known Ian for a long time, we worked very closely, but I still don't really know him.
Yeah. Well, basically it's because I'm a shy guy. I'm a shy guy behind it all. But I just love people.
And any more chapters to come, do you think?
Yeah, probably. But not television.
Vale, Ian. And that's the show for today. From all the team, thanks for watching. We look forward to seeing you next time on Landline. But before we go, here's the weekly weather update from the Bureau. Bye for now.
G'day from the Bureau. Here's a look at the week's weather from today, Sunday, the 28th of April. In the past 24 hours, there's not too much to draw out of the satellite imagery due to dry, clear weather being dominant across Australia. To the south of the country, we do see a significant uniform band of clouds showing us the position of a cold front, which doesn't quite make landfall today, but it will on Monday, bringing cool and showery conditions to parts of Victoria, Tasmania and South Australia. Rainfall will be light, just single digits in most places, with a dusting of snow about the higher peaks. Elsewhere, dry, apart from some showers across the eastern seaboard. A low will develop off the west coast on Tuesday, bringing areas of rain to parts of Western Australia. Any rain here will be welcome, but don't expect to get much. Totals will be variable, but broad parts of the central west, the wheat belt and the southwest land division could see between 2 and 15 millimetres. Similar rainfall totals for much of eastern New South Wales, with cool and showery weather there. On Wednesday, the areas of rain in the west move to the far south of WA. Once again, only modest rainfall amounts expected. Patchy hit and miss showers all along the east coast, right from eastern Victoria up to the Cape York Peninsula and across the top end as well. Yet another cool morning on Thursday for southern Australia leads to broad areas of both fog and frost to start the day. No weather features to bring much rain of significance around the country. We may see an upper-level low-pressure system spread showers and storms around New South Wales on Friday. Given this is the end of the week, there's still a fair amount of uncertainty over the location and intensity of this upcoming rain, so if you're in that area, keep your eye on the forecast for the end of the week. Elsewhere around the country, the week wraps with settled and dry autumn conditions. That's it from me for this week, but we'll see you again next time.